Welcome to Raspberry Pi for Beginners, a short series that will introduce you to Raspberry Pi and help get you started using one. Funding for this program is provided in part by the Institute of Museum and Library Services through the Library of Michigan, and based off information provided by the official Raspberry Pi website, raspberrypi.org. In this episode, you'll learn what a Raspberry Pi is, what it can be used for, and what the basic components are. So what is a Raspberry Pi? It's a relatively low-cost computer that's the size of a credit card. It uses a standard mouse and keyboard and can be plugged into a computer monitor or TV. The best part is that you don't need expert technology skills to set it up. It was originally created to teach basic computing to students in low-income countries. What can it be used for? You can use your Pi as you would any computer. Pi has a desktop. You can browse the internet using the Chromium web browser, which is very similar to the Google Chrome web browser. You can visit any site that you would visit on any other browser in order to watch videos on YouTube, check in with social media, or play games. You can use the LibreOffice productivity suite, which is similar to Microsoft Office or Google Docs. LibreOffice includes LibreOffice Writer, which is a word processor, LibreOffice Calc, which offers a spreadsheet tool similar to Excel, LibreOffice Impress, which is the equivalent to PowerPoint, and LibreOffice Base, which is a database tool like Access from Microsoft Office. You can use Raspberry Pi to learn how to program in languages like Scratch or Python. Scratch is a programming language targeted at children that allows you to create games, stories, and animations. It's often used as an educational tool to learn coding. Python is more advanced than Scratch, but it's one of the most popular programming languages. It can be used to design applications like games or to run simple tasks. You can use Raspberry Pi as a virtual gaming platform. Retro gaming with platforms like the original Nintendo are becoming increasingly popular. Did you know you can build a retro gaming platform using the Raspberry Pi? It requires more components than your typical Pi setup for desktop use, but it is still much cheaper than today's video gaming consoles. There are so many possibilities with Pi, from creating a home security system to creating a robot that follows you around the house. To view even more projects, visit projects.raspberrypi.org and take a look through their digital archives. What are the components? The Raspberry Pi board. The newest, fastest, and easiest to use model is the Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. It comes with 2 GB, 4 GB, or 8 GB of RAM. Even 2 GB of RAM is enough to use the Pi as a desktop. The cheapest version are the Zero models. They can cost as little as $5 and are even smaller than your average model. It may be small, but it's still powerful enough for projects, especially if you have limited physical space to work with. The Pi board typically includes a few USB ports where you can plug in things like a mouse, keyboard, or camera. Part of your Pi boards are general purpose input-output pins, or GPIO. This is how you connect the Pi to electronic devices like LED lights or motors. Most models include Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capabilities. Power supply. All Raspberry Pi models have a USB port to supply power. You need a power supply that provides at least 3 amps. Power supplies for Pi models are much smaller than your average computer and are typically the size of a smartphone charger. A MicroSD card. An SD card stores all the files on the operating system. When you buy a computer, this is something that typically is already included, but for Raspberry Pi, you'll need to buy it separately unless you purchase a kit. The SD card depends on your project, but the official Raspberry Pi website recommends purchasing one with a capacity of at least 8 GB. You can purchase an SD card that is already set up with Raspberry Pi operating system, which is called Raspbian. Raspbian is a Linux-based operating system. If you're not familiar with Linux, that's perfectly okay. It's like Windows or Mac OS, but designed for programmers. It might take some getting used to, but it's considered more secure than Windows, and it's free to use. It also has an adorable penguin named Tux as its mascot. If you'd prefer another operating system, you can download your favorite operating system onto the SD card. Keyboard and mouse. In order to initially set up a Raspberry Pi, you'll need a USB keyboard and a USB mouse. Once you've completed your setup, you can use Bluetooth devices instead. Computer screen or TV. In order to view the desktop, you need some type of screen. It can be a computer monitor, and TVs work great too. You'll also need a cable to connect the screen to your Pi. Pi includes 2 micro HDMI ports, which are compatible with most TVs and computer monitors. Just make sure you have a micro HDMI to HDMI cable, or if you have a standard HDMI cable, you'll need a micro HDMI to HDMI adapter. If you connect your Pi to the TV will also act as your speaker system. Other optional components. A case. Your Pi is a delicate device, and while it's not essential, it does provide protection to the exposed connections. Like any computer, the Pi can also overheat, so it's recommended that you buy a case with a fan to keep this from happening. Headphones or speakers. Most Raspberry Pi models include a standard audio port, so your Raspberry Pi can play sound, but you'll need to plug in headphones or speakers to hear it. So that is all for this episode of Raspberry Pi for Beginners. If you have questions or you want to learn more, give us a call at 248-796-4358 and tune in for episode 2, where you learn how to set up a Raspberry Pi.